Okay, I think we're going to get started so that we don't run out of time today. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our event today, Innovation for Mining, Mobilizing Global Collaboration. We're glad you're able to join us today. My name is Sherry Greasley. I'm the VP of Business Admin at CEMI and also for the MICA program. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We're very excited to be hosting this event along with our collaboration partners, Global Mining Guidelines Group, or GMG, Amira Global, and Mets Ignited. And we have a morning of presentations, panel discussions that I'm sure everybody will find informative, interesting, and even encouraging. So first I'll get some housekeeping items out of the way. So there's 2 exits at the back of the room, as everybody's seen, I think. The washrooms are just outside this door to the right, both the men's and ladies'. We will have a networking coffee break. It's scheduled around 10:40 a.m. this morning. However, it'll be hosted outside the room where the breakfast was, but there is water and juice available during the whole event at the side of the room. And after each panel, we're hoping to have time for questions from the audience. We will have a microphone available if anybody has a question. If we run out of time, I'd encourage you to speak to the people either at the break or perhaps after the event. We have some time where you can approach them one-on-one. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Charles Nyabezi, who's the Vice President of Business Development and Commercialization at CEMI and the MICA program.
All right, good morning, everyone. You're supposed to respond. It's like I feel like I'm at church doing a sermon today. Okay, but anyways, that aside. So I want to welcome everybody from all over the world to this event. It's always amazing, so many great people in one room, so many people that are like-minded in one room, people that are talking about the same thing, excited about mining and where it's going, and just how mining is going to literally save the world from itself. So happy to be here talking to you today. The MICA program, MICA, depending on where you're from, stands for Mining Innovation Commercialization Accelerator, funded by the Government of Canada to the tune of $40 million through a department called ICED, as part of a program called the SIF program, which is SIF is Strategic Innovation Fund. And it's a 5-year program. We are going to be matured by 2026. So please bear with us as we get better over time. In terms of our vision, we want to connect regional innovation centers to really create something dynamic, something different, right? We want to create a national connected mining innovation for mining ecosystem that will truly disrupt how mining is today and how it will be in the future. Nothing happens without a network. And many times when we tell people that the mining innovation ecosystem is more than just the operating mines, we have to expand it. And let people know, that the ecosystem for mining is made up of SMEs, academic institutions, R&D institutions. It's made up of associations. It's also made up of R&D centers, some of which have different kinds of assets, like test mines. It's also made up of incubators, accelerators, and of course the government is a part of this ecosystem. One of the statements that I've been making lately is that innovation is like raising a child, right? And people will tell you that it takes a community to raise a child. Well, it certainly takes a community to raise an innovation. So this is why this community is so important, because together we can work together to actually raise an innovation. No innovation is raised on an island. So it's so important for us to stress the importance of the ecosystem that supports innovation. MICA has 6 main partners from across the country, all the way from the East Coast with the College of North Atlantic, and we've got Gary and Mike here with us today. Gary and Mike, put your hands up so people can see you. There you go, from the East Coast with our College of North Atlantic. We've got Misa from Quebec, Alain, right here, Alain, and Hamchi is here as well. Put up your hand, there you go. There you go. And then we also have Mars Innovation right here in Toronto, and Leah is here with us. Leah. Awesome. And then as we move towards the east, of course, CEMI is in Ontario as well. As we move towards the west, sorry, I said east, the west, we've got Paul with College of Sask Poly. Thank you, Paul. And we do have representation in Alberta with Alberta Innovates. Innotech Alberta, which is a subsidiary of Alberta Innovates. And I don't think there we go. We've got John. Yes, thank you, John. And then at the very end of Canada, in the West Coast, we've got Brim, and Janice, are you here yet? Janice will be here shortly. So we have a partner in BC. The reason why we have these many partners across the country is because we want to tap into the innovation ecosystem of this country, right? And the only way to do that is to boots on the ground. So this is why we've got these six main partners, because they are more familiar with the culture of the land in the areas that they're in, and also because of the geology of mining, they represent the cross-sector of the Canadian mining industry. Open pit mines in BC with Teck, of course, one of my favorites, if your mining companies have not been mentioned, you're also one of my favorites. We also have Alberta with oil sands, Saskatchewan, potash, soft rock, uranium mining, and you move over to Manitoba, Ontario, base metal mines, precious metal mines, and then you move to Quebec, of course, same, base metal mines, precious metals, and then you move towards the East Coast, where we do have some open pit mines there as well. But again, representing the geology of the mining, of mining across Canada. And the beauty about that is that Canada has SMEs that represent all of mining, which is really cool. We do have main partners that, as I've said, our main partners are selected. I think I gave you the rationale so that they can represent the boots on the ground in their areas and also tap into the innovation ecosystem. Our main partners will be conducting activities in their own environments as well. So we do have regional and national events. And they'll also be working to do what we're calling mapping the innovation ecosystem in their area, because what we don't know, right? So we need to map the ecosystem so we can better understand the lay of the land that supports innovation, the supply chain for commercialization of innovation. Our main partners also have a board representation. So on the CEMI board, there's representation from all the main partners. Again, CEMI, national organization, MICA, national program. Our main partners are also going to help us with identifying new members and also helping us achieve some of the MICA KPIs, which includes things like making sure that we're creating jobs, making sure that we are creating new IP, making sure we're creating new technologies, new products and services. So our main partners will play a role in that as well. In terms of our funding overview, we did get $40 million from the government. $10 million of that will go towards network development activities, including commercialization support services. $30 million or so is being dedicated towards technical projects. And we did do our first call for proposals, and I mentioned that briefly, shortly. But up to $20 million will be allocated, hopefully, before July. We'll be making some announcements to the public so you know exactly what's going on there. In terms of how the funding works quickly for you, the government has stipulated that we can only sort of have up to 75% of government money in any one project. So that's what I mean by that 75% stacking limit. And MICA contribution is up to about a third of the project size itself, up to a total of $2.5 million. So we cannot do projects more than $2.5 million with MICA money. MICA pillars, network development activities is one big pillar that we have, commercialization support services, and technical projects. Under the network development activities, and I'm not going to read everything here for you, but I will say that our goal is to do whatever we can to make sure that the technologies we're supporting are seen, observed, and understood by the ecosystem. So all these kinds of events make sure that we do just that. We're also going to be doing commercialization support services, which I enjoy, closing the gap. There is something out there, folks, called the commercialization valley of death. It is a terrible place, filled with dead companies that could have been something, right? So our job in this ecosystem is to make sure that we're transitioning technologies across the valley of death through commercialization support services. CEMI, MICA, we don't know it all. We have to rely on you, the support ecosystem, to help us to move those technologies forward in a meaningful way. MICA does have 4 themes. These 4 themes were developed through consultation with the experts, people like, Ernst & Young, people like McKinsey, the Hatches, the Deloittes. We sort of looked at their trends about where mining's issues were. And again, based on our experience, talking to mining companies and talking to our peers, and we identified that productivity, energy, smart digital, and environment, probably environment should be first, but these 4 areas are the areas where we think we need to solve the problems that mining has so that mining can continue to be better. Okay, so who can join MICA? So MICA is membership-based. The reason for membership-based is this. Douglas has often said that it's like joining a gym, right? Anybody can join a gym, right? But the question is, are you participating in the gym? Are you actually going to the gym, right? So with MICA membership, the reason why you become a member is that you now commit to be part of this group, and then we promise you value for your membership. So who can be a MICA member? Mining companies can be a member of MICA and the innovation support ecosystem. So everyone else, all of us who are not mining operators, are part of that whole group that can become MICA members. And we do have a tiered membership structure. You want to call it subscription if you want, but it is feature-based, service delivery-based, and our promise is to do work plans with the members so we can help them to move things forward in a meaningful way so that they're not passive members, but that they're active members. There are benefits to mining companies. I think one of the biggest benefits is that we do have leverage funding, but also there is an ability, this is the support organizations, mining companies is next. Benefits to support organizations is leverage funding, and we also have this collaborative platform that we have. One of the things that the government stipulated to us is you must create a national network, right? So we're making a lot of efforts to create a national network. Technology funding, there's lots of people that support technologies out there. There's lots of technologies. But to build the network of connectivity, that's so important. So that's a big benefit to members. Also, market opportunities are an important piece. The commercialization capabilities of other members are also important. And of course, investment and cross-sector collaboration is also important. Benefits to mine operators, again, mining companies are so important. They're the buyers of innovations, they're the consumers of innovation, and they do have the challenges that we want to solve. So one of the biggest benefits to mining companies for MICA is that early adoption of technologies that are coming out of the whole MICA project pipelines. And also, mining companies have assets that can be demonstration sites, and they also have the ability to leverage funding and to support and participate in networking activities that are MICA related. And there's a few more benefits here that I'm not going to read out. So we do have members. There's a bit of a summary of our current members. We've got 86, I think we've 87 members right now. But you can see that the majority of MICA members are SMEs. These are the innovators, the creators of innovations that are being channeled towards the mining industry. Here's a bit of a summary of what has happened so far with our project submission process. So we did our first call in February, closed that in March. We did a full application request for about a month, March 25th, April 25th. And we did receive 107 applications, amazing technologies, like some really cool stuff in there. Unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly what's in there just yet, but really, really, really cutting edge, bleeding edge technologies that are going to make a difference in mining. We had 83 applicants, and today we have 83 full applications under review from across the country. And our board is meeting this week, and hopefully we'll be able to make some announcements after some conversations with the government on releasing the names of the approved projects, hopefully before the end of July. We'll do that. Okay, so here's our process. We received applications, and we constructed what we call an industry ranking group, which was mining companies that we brought together to rank projects and tell us what they thought about them from a company perspective and an industry perspective. We also had a project selection committee which was set up, which looked at projects and provided a short list of the ones that could be potentially approved. And we also have board approvals in June, as I said. The government will endorse, not approve, just endorse some projects that we would have selected for announcements in July. And we are planning to have a second call, and this is really important. So if you want to take notes, take this down. We are planning to have a second call for proposals by December of this year, which means that if you missed out on the first call for proposals, you have an opportunity to go on to the second one. And also, MICA members who don't get funded in this round can also submit for the second call. The other really important piece is that if we don't fund you as MICA, we will find other ways to potentially help you through our network and ecosystem partners. All right, this is the transition side. And I'm now going to call Douglas Morrison, our President and CEO, and MICA Network Director, to present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charles. So my name is Douglas Morrison. I'm the President and CEO of CEMI, as Charles just said. He does most of the work on MICA, so although I'm nominally the director for MICA, actually I don't do hardly any of the work for MICA. So that's the workhorse. Eventually we're going to have the panel up here on these beautiful red seats that are incredibly uncomfortable. So not only are they the red hot seats, I suggest to the panel members that you don't actually try and sit on them entirely. I found that leaning on them is about the best you can achieve. So if Charles is ready, good to go. Thank you very much, Charles. There we go. That's really what we're going to talk about here today, is not so much what we have tried to do within CEMI in terms of technology. We will touch on that briefly. But the bigger reason is why we should be doing this, because we believe that the mining industry is actually on the edge of becoming center stage in the global economy. First of all, that's where CEMI sits in this whole space. There's the TRL space. We know that we're in this mining innovation niche. So we focus on projects between 4 and 8, and in the MICA program, we're actually focusing on between 5 and 8, or 6 and 8. And we focus both on the SMEs in the mining sector, but also in cross-sector innovators. There's lots of innovation happening in other sectors of the economy, and none of them are coming to talk to us about all the fabulous things they're doing, because they're busy doing their thing in their own sector. If we want to know what's happening there and how we can use it, we have to go and talk to them about that. And that's what we intend to do with the MICA program. We also recognize that research and innovation are two completely different things. One is research is new knowledge. That's why you get an MSc or a PhD. Innovation, on the other hand, is a new business. And that's where we're faltering, is translating successful research projects into good businesses, viable businesses. And so this is why the mining industry is moving into this new important space. It's because everything now is focused on climate change. And if we want to have a low carbon economy, we have to have a great deal more metals, and we have to produce those metals faster than ever before, and we have to do it in a much more sustainable fashion than we have done it ever before. And that means that strategic innovation is critical. That means not relying on what mine operators tell you they think the next thing is. Executives have to be looking ahead to say, no, the next thing is this thing. I've been an operator, I spent 15 years in operations, and when you're in operations, you have a daily task. You have to produce so many tons per day. That's part of the program. And what the global copper price is not your concern. That's somebody else's job, and that's the reason for the change. So here we are. The critical priorities for the industry are to fuel the green transition to a low-carbon economy and arrest climate change. We need to do two important things. Number one is increase global productive capacity at lower cost. It's fabulous that the metal prices are increasing for mining companies, but in actual fact, we need a copper price or a nickel price that drives fossil fuels out of the economy. It doesn't help that we double or triple or quadruple the price of copper, because what that does is it means that the green transition to an electric economy is strangled by the higher cost. So that's not going to help. And the other thing we all know is we have to improve our social and environmental sustainability characteristics. That means complete resolution of mine waste containment systems, and if we possibly can, integrate into the other natural resource sectors. So we'll talk about that at the end. This is the picture for copper. A whole host of metals there, but I've highlighted copper and nickel because they're the most prominent energy metals. This is Bloomberg. This is not my graph. But basically it says, and we all can understand this because electric cars take 5 times more copper than an internal combustion engine takes. So 5 times more copper, roughly 5 times more nickel, and all the other metals are very similar. The problem is it's very, very difficult to have that rate of growth. Typically, the industry works on a growth rate, demand growth of 1 to 3%. But if we want to have that amount of copper and nickel by 2035, that's a 10 to 15% growth rate per year, every year, for the next 15 years. That's the challenge. So we're not in Kansas any longer. We're in a completely different space, and if we need to, and we have to make this transition to a low-carbon economy, this is the only way we can accomplish that. All the other critical minerals are very important too. I did hear a very good definition of a critical mineral last week, which is a critical mineral is any mineral that you don't have enough of. That's what makes it critical. So, and this just shows us where we need to go in terms of carbon reduction to stay on the path of 1.5 degrees global warming by 2100. This is the International Panel, IPCC panel's route to success. That's how they expect to get to that target. See how you do most of the work in the beginning and less work at the end. No one in the history of the world has ever met a deadline by doing most of the work at the beginning and then slacking off to the end and cruise to the end of the deadline. The best you can ever do is to do equal amounts of work all the way through, and most of us, including me, do very little work at the beginning and a lot of work at the end. So that's not a realistic outcome. And what it's showing us is we're going to actually miss the target. So this is where we are with copper. You can see on the right-hand side, the Copper Research Unit tells us we're going to see a 15 million ton gap in copper productive capacity by 2035. That's not a good number, when in actual fact Bloomberg says we need 5 times more copper. That's not a helpful thing. So, and we can see, yes, exploration budgets are increasing, but we're not finding huge deposits of copper because it doesn't just take lots of money, it also takes lots of time. And if we move on, we'll see here we are. This is the actual projection from Wood Mackenzie, and you can see where the Tier 1 deposits sit in that. We actually hit roughly peak copper around about 2024, but we are fortunate that we have a lot of sub-economic, those probable green projects in the blob there. They're probable projects because they're sub-economic at the present time. We can bring those on stream very, very quickly if we actually improve our extraction processes and reduce the cost and make those probable projects actual projects that we can bring online. And we have to do that because we can't possibly find big deposits fast enough. This is why. So you want to have strategic innovation to improve productivity, innovation to bring those green projects online, because you'll see lower down below the Tier 1 deposits, it takes 15 to 20 years to bring a new Tier 1 project online. If you found a Tier 1 project tomorrow morning, it will be 20 years before it produces a ton of copper. That's the problem with exploration. It's a much longer play, and so we need to bring innovations in to make that thing move forward faster. And that's really the demand that we have by 2042. These are all numbers that are not attractive numbers, but they are the numbers by the people who do projections for global commodities. And that's where it goes in 2045. Same thing is true for, this is exactly the same graph for nickel, and you can see the kind of profile that we have for nickel, but unfortunately in the case of nickel, we don't have a huge blob of green projects, probable projects. It's a very thin line of projects, and that's the projections that we see for nickel. Now, we can certainly have a lot of innovations that means battery technology changes significantly in the next 5 or 10 or 15 years, and perhaps we will need less nickel than this projection says. But we're still going to need a great deal of nickel, plus the lithium to go with it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these projections here are just examples. They're not the whole story. And that's where nickel goes by 2040. So unattractive numbers, and we have to do something about that. So this is one of the things we have to do, high capacity systems. All of our underground mines for sure rely on the LHD, and right now we're making a lot of effort to transition from diesel engines to battery electric vehicles, but that's not the problem. The problem is it's a batch process. In a batch process, if you look at the cycle in blue, the LHD effectiveness, you dig for 30 seconds into the muck pile, you travel for a minute, you dump at the other end for 30 seconds, you travel for a minute. The whole cycle is 3 minutes or 180 seconds, and you only touch the product less than 10% of the time. And most of the day, that's exactly what we do. And if you fiddle with those numbers, it doesn't change significantly. In other words, the final product of a mining operation, which is to blast ore and have it ready for transportation to the processing plant, when we do that, we actually don't touch that product more than 10% of the day, every single day. No other business produces its product in its factory and then leaves it sitting there 90% of the day, every single day of the week. That's what our industry does with a batch process. And so it means that that muck pile is not touched by any piece of equipment more than 10% of the day. And even when we do touch it, we actually touch it with a really huge machine. You can see the size of the machine that we move the ore with, and look at the size of the bucket. That machine weighs 3 times the size of the bucket, and it comes back empty, which means that we move 6 tons of machine for every ton of ore that we move, which means that 80% of the horsepower that we have underground is for the horses, when we're supposed to be in the production business, the ore production business, not the machine moving business. And we are currently in the machine moving business. And so, and of course, the biggest single cost for an underground mine is the ventilation system, which is rated on horsepower. So if you drastically reduce the horsepower that you're using, you also reduce your largest single cost, which is ventilation cost, energy for ventilation. So this is what you can do. These machines are currently available. They're not well designed at the present time for what we need them to do, but they are available and they can be modified. And so they move the rock 85% of the time. They have to relocate once in a while, 15% of the time. But the energy per ton moved, because the only thing that's moving is the conveyor in the center of that machine. And that's less than 20% of the total mass. So the energy that the loader uses is about 20% of the tons moved, and the LHDs are moving 6 times the tons moved. The ratio is 1:30. So the LHD is 30 times less cost effective than a continuous system at moving material. So if you have a machine that goes behind this unit, so you keep that material moving at 450 tons an hour, then you're moving it much faster, you're moving it cheaper, and the whole system works more quickly altogether. So the white machine at the top there can move material at 450 tons an hour, and an LHD is only moving it on average about 150 tons an hour, 3 times slower. And if we convert that into surface mines, we don't get quite the bang for our buck with continuous equipment in an open pit, because open pits are actually more cost effective than underground mines are already. So, but we can still get a 10-fold, 8 to 10-fold improvement if we move to continuous systems. These are systems that are easily designed. They're actually just been redesigned because we used to do this about 40, 50 years ago. So we're just reinventing old equipment, and instead of making it run by inefficient systems, making it run on electricity with automated digital controls. Bob's your uncle. Not rocket science, but has to be done. And this is the effect that we found in the underground mines for the big block cave mines that are trying to produce 100,000 tons per day. Most of the mines in Canada produce between 5,000 and 9,000 tons a day, but underground mines in Chile are trying to produce 100,000 tons a day. When we simulated the continuous production systems against the LHDs, we got a change in the cost of production of roughly, we dropped it by 40% to 60%, just by running the whole simulation and the whole process. And that doesn't include the fact that because we're using it with dramatically lower horsepower, the ventilation cost drops. So if you add that in, effectively it means that that production system is operating at 50% of the production cost or less. That's where we are. But that's not the only target that we have. To produce more material, we have to do that for absolute sure, but we also have to fix the sustainability problem. And that's where my colleague Vernon Riley comes in. He did a lot of work over the last 8 years on trying to design systems that will manage that better for us. And so when we looked at the current method of subaqueous deposition, that's the problem that we have. And the problem that we have is that it takes a lot of water, but it also essentially is an ongoing maintenance problem forever and ever, or at least between 1 and 10,000 years. That's the required life of these facilities. And you leave a permanent hazard in place that has to be managed almost in perpetuity. If we go the other way, in places where there's a water resource competition, we want to go to dry stacking, but dry stacking has exactly the same problem, and both of these solutions end up with a permanent toxic deposition somewhere in the natural environment. And the probability of failure of both of those is close to 100%, and the reason for that is because it has to be maintained by human beings. And if you have human beings involved in a maintenance program for the next 1,000 years, you can absolutely guarantee that somebody will do the wrong thing on the wrong day in the wrong way, and it will all fall apart. It's human nature that's the fallacy here, not the actual systems themselves. So what did we do? So Vern sat down and went through the whole process and wanted to end up with full and final mine closure with a probability of failure of close to 0. And when he realized that what we actually have to do at the end of the pipe coming out of the mill is split it into 2 different tails. One is a tolerably benign tail. So we do separation, sequestration, and then treat both types of tail. The green one is the secondary tolerably benign tail. It's not tolerable to me. It's tolerable to the plants that grow on it and don't die. In most tailing situations, if you put plants on top of the tailings will eventually kill the plants. On the other side, we take all the nasty stuff, all the valuable material, and put it into the 20%, and we can process that with various types of industrial processes, some of which are being invented as we speak. The other thing we can do with this, we can take it from tolerably benign to completely benign, so that it can now not just be used for any purpose, but can actually be used for agriculture by taking out the last little bit of contamination that's in that tail. And that's where our friends in Brim and other researchers are working on using engineered bioreactors of various forms to clean that material completely, so that that now becomes usable by agriculture. where that takes us to, and we can run both of those cells in different ways so that within 20 years, let's say, of the cessation of production of a mine, all of the tailings waste products have been resolved by various means, either biological or industrial processes, and we don't actually have a final deposition of toxic waste. This is why we need to do these kinds of things. If we go back to this graph, you can see what happens to us if we miss the 1.5 degree by the end of the century. So we can't miss that number. That should be considered to be an absolutely hard, must-do thing, but we're on track, from what I heard at COP, is that we might just miss that by a little bit. Missing it by a little bit is really, really bad. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And this is how we can help with that, because that tailings material that we produce, 80% of the tail that's benign is not just benign. When we started to look at, and it was Van who did this work, looking at the plants growing on that tolerably benign tail, those plants still grew 3 times faster and stronger than the control group. In other words, it's actually a beneficial component of soils that help plants grow faster and stronger. And if we use that material to improve the soil fertility in places where it's really low, like in the tropics, then we can accelerate the growth of forests and agriculture to begin to generate a great deal more oxygen from the plants and absorb carbon dioxide. I know there are people all around the world trying to invent a machine that will absorb carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's a really good thing to try to do, but the machine that we've had for billions of years are plants, and plants do that very, very effectively. We should mobilize the plants to do that faster for us. So that's where we are. This is where we want to go. If we take an SST approach, that's the current mine closure picture that we see. Typically for a large open pit, that's what it looks like. But it could look like this instead. And those green plants are actually producing oxygen and they're absorbing carbon dioxide. And if we did that everywhere, I think that's a better picture than the one on the top left. And I'd rather have that be our legacy as an industry than the one on the top left, which is the current legacy that we leave behind. And we can do that with the SST process and the bioreactors. And that's how we make all those things come together. So not only do we have to, first of all, increase the global productivity capacity for metals to drive the green transition, we also need to solve our sustainability problems. And what we can also do as a third objective is we can have mining integrated into the other self-sustaining natural resource production systems that exist, which are agriculture and forestry. So we no longer stay as the isolated industry that we are and have been for a long, long time. We change this picture entirely, and I think this is the way to save the planet. So these are the kinds of things that we're working on as an organization with all the SMEs that we're finding, and Charles has more SMEs coming in the door every single day. I'm quite sure lots of you have questions, but I don't have to answer those questions right now because we're moving on to the next phase of our proposal. I will be on a panel at the end, and so you can interrogate me at that time when we get to that stage, when I'm sitting on one of these incredibly uncomfortable stools. So that's it. So we'll move on. I'm going to introduce now Heather Edney, who's going to come up and introduce the industrial panel for the next phase of this exercise. So Heather is the CEO of the Global Mining Standards Group, GMG for short, and she's going to introduce the panelists herself. Thank you.
Good morning. If we could have the panelists and the moderator come up, I'm going to make a really quick introduction. As we were working with CEMI and Amira and at MICA to plan this event, we thought it's always good to start with hearing from the leaders in the industry, hearing some inspiration and direction from what our mining companies want and need. So that's where we're kicking off with this panel today. We did, I believe, Adrian, we've planned it that we're going to kick off with some questions, then open it up for if there's any questions from the floor. If there is a microphone, maybe we can have a runner ready for that time. And so I think we have really quick introductions from the my left. From the left side, we have Michael from Bort Longyear, Michelle Ash from Oz Minerals, Adrian is with MICA, and then Nancy, nice to meet you, with Agnico Eagle, and Cal Ruberg with Teck Resources. So they'll kick it off and then be ready to see what you can get out of them with some really good questions.
So good morning, everyone. My name's Adrian Beer from MICA. So I'm going to lead away pretty quickly in a bunch of questions. So noting that we've got one technology company, 3 mining organisations, I'm going to start with the technology company first and then throw it around. So really the focus of this is, what's our purpose for the future, what's our objectives, what's the role of innovation. And so I'm going to start with the term Industry 4.0, just to get it out there and get it out of the way. And I'm going to throw this question to Mike to start off with. What does innovation or Industry 4.0 mean for Bow Longyear in your business?
Well, yeah, I guess this isn't working, but I'm pretty loud. I think people can hear me. Yeah, with Board Longyear.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. Cheers. Yeah, with Board Longyear, historically we're an industrial company, been around for like 130 years. Industry 4.0 is drastically changing who we are very quickly. Whether it's our drill rigs and how we're applying Industry 4.0 technologies to automating rod tripping, which allows us to change the diversity of our workforce or change the level of safety we can provide in the field. We're developing rigs that run off grid now, which is helping us with our environmental footprints. And then we've created an entire division called Geological Data Services, where we're utilizing Industry 4.0 technologies to provide unified ore body knowledge to the mining industry and enhancing that ore body knowledge with data analytics and machine learning. So we've transitioned quite a bit from Industry 4.0, and it's been digital technologies and data are at the core of our company now.
Thanks, Mike. And then I'm going to turn to Nancy, because I wanted to ask about the business drivers from, let's say, the client side, from the operator side around technology and innovation. What do you see the big drivers are for innovation in your organisation?
First, we'll start to say that innovation is very motivating. Like all our people wants to work in innovation. They wants to try new technology. We have a lot of different projects. But for all projects, we need to have a business reason. So our business is more and more complex. We have a lot of challenge. So we need to find a good business reason to push this technology. And this is a big challenge. We don't choose the location of our deposit. So very often we are in a remote area. The underground is giving us a lot of more challenging than the open pit for communication perspective, cycle time. So that's another big challenge. And the other one that we have right now is our mines are deeper and deeper. So it's hot over there. There needs a lot of ventilation, a lot of cooling system. So we need to integrate all those technology and those challenges together to do a good business reason. And every time we do a business case to justify this technology, it's hard to have it positive because CapEx is a hurdle. And then we say we're going to look at productivity. But how to really show the value of this productivity and push that in our budget or life of mine, this is where people are not comfortable. So that's where we need help and we need a lot of support to understand how we can push this technology and make it like tangible so we can use it in our business case and our production profile.
So Michelle,
yeah,
I'm going to throw to you on
do I get two business drivers as well?
You want to, don't you?
Oh, yes, I do.
No, I'm not going to let you. The role of a mining company as a tech investor versus a customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one of the really interesting things that started to evolve over the last sort of couple of years is mining companies starting to think about this whole idea of whether you call it venture capital, whether you call it venturing, but certainly how, as an investor, we can speed up the rate. So again, why do you want to be an investor? If you want to be an investor to get revenues and you want those sort of, the unicorns, don't do it. Why should we be an investor? It's because we want solutions to really interesting and complex problems. And so we should be focusing on the solution. So then the question is, if we want that solution, how best can we accelerate the rate of development of that solution? And we have a whole series of things in our gambit. So everything from being a great customer, so having test mines or a collection of test mines, which is something we're working on at the moment. How do we connect some of the test mines from around the world so that we can trial things at the best places? How do you pilot? Sometimes how do you build or help build that organisation or the quality of that management team or, those sorts of things. And sometimes it is by being an investor. Because, for all sorts of reasons, that company might need a strategic investor, they might need to get through that valley of death, they might need to, all sorts of reasons why they might want some capital. So I think, what I think is a really interesting proposition at the moment is if, as mining companies, we think about this whole idea of ventures and venturing, which might mean investing, might mean partnering, might mean all sorts of different things, but we're focusing it on accelerating the rate of those product development, then I think it's just another really interesting tool in our toolkit, and especially if we're prepared to work collaboratively. And I know I've been talking about this a few times over the years, but as mining companies coming together, as associations, industries coming together, as a collection of supplier organisations potentially coming together. So for me, that's what we should be thinking about, and it's that extra tool in our toolkit.
So Carl, lucky last, you get the question on culture. What role does
Boy.
So based on
Now
what we've
you
just
want the
heard,
business driver
yeah,
question,
you
don't
want
you?
business drivers. What's the role of culture in driving and innovation and change?
So I think one of the bigger issues that we have is that while we're actually doing a lot of innovation and a lot of invention, and a lot of application of these inventions to value-driven processes, the hurdle comes when you've actually introduced that innovation and you have a superintendent who's looking at the guidance that this innovation is providing and going, well, I know better. I know how this whole cycle works, and I'm going to turn that thing off.
Yes.
And so all the work that's been done, all of the potential value that you actually have stored is no longer being stored. The second problem is that culturally we look at all of these particular issues in a mine as singular processes. We have hull cycle, we have drill and blast, we have ore body knowledge, we have shipping, and then we have shipping. And so one of the bigger issues is that we don't look at these things typically as a systemic system or a dynamic system that can actually be simulated as a dynamic system over many years to really see what the potential is. And right now we're at a very unique and wonderful time in our industry. And yes, there are all kinds of apocalyptic possibilities, but there are also very many potential wonderful opportunities. So when we did some of the system simulations on for example, a systemic view of met coal from pit to port over 30 years, introducing as to yet uninvented small trucks into the system, we talked with Doug about this, actually reduces your CapEx, reduces your OpEx, reduces your carbon tax to basically nothing, as well as maintains your productivity. And this is all based on data. And so if we can't have a discussion that's logically based on being able to sort of not only have a discussion about, well, we think it's going to be hydrogen, or I think it's going to be batteries, or let's actually model the systems in a way that is believable out to a point where you can actually understand what the effect is over a long period of time. And culturally explain to people who are making decisions on the floor what these systems are doing. And that's one of the big problems with machine learning systems. They're black boxes. It says, do this. And you're going, I don't know, I don't think so. And we have a couple of really good examples of that. So.
But I mean, Carl, I think you actually make a really interesting point as well around these different views and different opinions. I mean, I think one of the really interesting things at the moment is that we are all trying to manage change, manage innovation, manage cultural change, the way people behave, the things they do on the face, in a time of great uncertainty. You know, we can't, no longer is it as simple as projecting what we did historically or projecting even the outcomes historically forward and saying that is what the future is going to look like. We have much more unpredictability, and you know, I think there's a lot of evidence, you know, around in geopolitically and around us. So what tends to happen when you've got this uncertainty going forward is different views emerge, fundamentally different views about, you know, energy going forward and energy mixes going forward, or around, you know, even the demand for, you know, as was pointed out before, the demand for copper and nickel and what's that really going to look like, etc. And because of that, you end up with a lot of dichotomous opinions about things. And I think one of the skills of us as leaders, as innovators, as leaders of our industry, is how do we allow and hold that tension of those two different views actually, you know, being around and us even engaging in them simultaneously. And how do we develop our ability to listen and to engage people in that conversation? Because I don't think any of us can predict right now some of those future outcomes. So the best that we can do is keep that conversation. You know, we do have to place some bets because that's where our investment goes. But being really comfortable with different views and allowing those different views to surface. So you know, I think that's a really interesting cultural aspect that you raise, Cal. Yeah.
So speaking of different views, I'll ask also for audience questions. So start to get yourself organised, and if there is any on the floor, please feel free to put your hand up because we do want this to be interactive. Oh, we're straight away.
I have a question. Did I hear you right? You're saying that the future is smaller trucks?
Could be. And that's the whole.
I would say yes.
It's
the
not the
modelling
answer,
suggests yes.
but it is an answer, and I think that it's a very, very compelling answer.
It is.
It's a very compelling answer.
That goes against everything we've been doing for
Well,
about 50 years.
I'll give you two stories. One is so one of our chief mining engineer in our met coal operations. So he's been there for 30 years. He's been planning mines for bigger and bigger trucks. And even our sheds, even our maintenance sheds, go from small to big.
And freaking
it's a point of pride. It's a point of pride. And so the thing is that you have this discussion, and then we show him the simulation, and we show him the movie, and I'll come back to the movie later. And then you see the 60-ton trucks running around. There are 270 of them. They have to be a level 5 autonomous. They have to be surge loaded because they don't match your bucket sizes. And you're not going to change out your shovels that fast. And so all of a sudden he's going, well, now you've mined FB. You've played a very terrible trick on my mind, and I can't get it out of my mind, because it does a whole lot of things to his mine plan. The bench heights are much smaller. The road widths can be smaller. You're running your dispatch like a swarm of ants. And in fact, the algorithms we've created are, in fact, ant algorithms, where they cross lanes constantly. And there are 3 lanes, not 2. And so, you begin to open your mind to possibilities. And, we had this discussion with Doug. Well, forget trucks. If you have a 14-kilometer haul, then why are you trucking at all? Yeah. And and the other big C issue, it came to mind when Michelle was speaking, is that how many know Avatar? Yeah. And how many people know unobtainium? So when you're speaking of mining to the general public, I usually use unobtainium as the proxy. And they know what unobtainium is, but they don't know the difference between heating coal and met coal. And we have a very big problem with big C culture. The big C culture sees mining as the thing that's killing, the indigenous avatars on Pandora. So
Right. How do I, as a moderator, bring us back from the from Avatar? Thank you, Carl.
So I'll pick up on.
But they all want their cell phone though.
Yeah,
Yes, they
I'll,
do. Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'll pick up on that same question. So Carl was talking about open cut simulations that his company has done. We did some similar underground simulations with exactly the same result, which is as you automate, as you electrify, the trucking fleet that you need goes down significantly, normally at least 2 sizes, sometimes even 3 sizes, you know, in terms of you go from 55s to sort of 30s or 25s tonne trucks. And then when you add in, and this is to pick up on Doug's point, when you add in the idea of continuousness, which you can actually create with the automation cycle, you then add in you know, some sort of conveyance system. And I know Nico Eagle's been doing some interesting work with different types of conveyance systems. Then you know you end up with a really interesting low cost and relatively low capital, because you know I know a lot of the CFOs that I talk to, ours is one of them, sort of go, recapitalisation of our industry, and you're sort of going, well, yes, but then how do we do that wisely and think about you know lower capital solutions? But yeah, absolutely, smaller trucks. But I don't know whether Nancy, you wanted to pick up on the. Because you guys have been doing some really interesting things with conveyance systems.
Yeah,
recently.
but we have the one technology that we push a lot is the rail layer. So that's one where we try to remove a lot of trucks in the distance, but everything is related to depth as well, and if you have the infrastructure, but it's still, it's very efficient, but it was a new technology, but I have to say to start it and make it happen, we had a lot of challenge. So we say that the technology is there, is ready, but you need to have a good team. You need to have the dedication to make it work and happen. Now we are very happy and very successful, but it took some time. So new technology, it seems to work, but you need to have a lot of people that believe in it and want it, and the management has to be there to support it, to make it happen, to be successful. Because it's a lot of change, and it's a lot of change management as well.
We often see like technology has 2 steps of adoption. The decision to do something differently is the first step, and then the implementation of the new technology to see if it delivers an outcome. They're almost 2 separate parts, and that first journey can often be the delay to the second, right?
Yeah.
Getting the business to embrace. Maybe Mike, your view from supplying new technology.
Yeah.
Well, I live that every day, but yeah, you know, I think that the key to integrating technologies into businesses and companies is really the willingness to fail. You need to be engaged from the CEO down in an idea, in a vision, and accept the failures that come along the way. And I think that's really the only way this industry is going to move forward, is to get more of those types of thinkers within these businesses. And you know, I think from a Mets company perspective, you know, there's often a very short patience for failure in mining, which is leading to us not changing. And so I think more and more though, there's thinkers that understand the process of integrating technologies into workflows and accepting the failures along the way.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, that's a really good point. So one of the things that we're pushing with our teams is, you know, how do you fail fast, but fail small? You know, don't fail having bought 50 automated trucks at $5 million a pop. You know, what's the minimal viable product that you can get out there, you can test the idea, you can see, you know, what's going to work, what's not going to work, you can bring it back, you can mould it, change it, etc. And I think working with suppliers has been absolutely key to that, because, you know, a mining company is not going to be the one that's messing around with this stuff, but what we can do is say, this is the problem we want to solve. You guys have got, you know, most of that. Let's get it out, get it in people's hands. You know, in your case, getting it into the drillers' hands. Let them touch and feel and play with it. They'll tell you what's working and what's not working, normally in no uncertain terms. You guys can then fix and change it, and then we can get it back out again. But we're doing that small, quick sort of iterations rather than, you know, what we used to do in the industry, which is sort of design it in the back room, polish it up, all the engineers are really happy with it. We pay, you know, 5, 10, 20, $50 million for it. We roll it out. Everybody hates it. They stab it. We roll it out again. We keep rolling it. But so this whole idea of short, sharp, minimum viable product, working closely, not only with suppliers, but with other mining companies so that we can, you know, fail fast and get things out faster as well.
I think the growth hack to that are these R&D environments. We have 2 of them in our geological data services group. One's at the NORCAT site here in Sudbury. I think that's how you fail fast. You get early user feedback. It's integrated into the design. The opinion of the user is as important as the opinion of the engineer or the product manager or the client. So I think that's a key factor in failing fast.
But the big challenge is to find a good project as well. So the impact will be important on the business side. I'm coming back again on the business side and on the change management, because that's what we are driving. We are a business. So to find a good project, so it's going to bring a big change in the mentality and in the company. And that's where it's very important to regroup all the operation and remove all those silos that we have presently. So one of our big challenge right now in project is work on data and measurement and big data, but bring everybody together. So from the exploration to the tailing deposition and all the services. So we need to be all together in the control room, really look at the effect and find where is our critical path and work on this. And really put it fast with new technology and innovation. And I need to have that big data and artificial intelligence. It's very easy. But it's hard to have a lot of big data, because when you start to dig in your data, you realize that half of it are not good. So you cannot create models. So it's going to come, but it won't be tomorrow. But we need to have the structure in place now to work with those big data, because if not, it's just a small model.
We started 10 years, no, more than that. We started 14 years ago in standardizing all of our haul data collection. So we have no OEM computers on our trucks, none. And so we have a very hybrid fleet. And so from 10 years ago, we collect about 420 data points twice a second from all our mines. So now when we started looking at predictive and preventative maintenance machine learning systems, we had literally 12 years of data. And as you said, the data quality is absolutely critical, and it's absolutely bad generally.
I
got it.
So, as you know, I've been doing it for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I've been hearing this stuff about predictive maintenance and we got to use more data. And we didn't call it big data before; we just called it integrated data or whatever. And we have a lot of data already. And
We do.
In IT, there's a saying: the most used data is the most accurate data. You can't wait till it's good before you start using it.
Correct.
The other thing that I've seen is there's a whole lot of data we're not even using that would be highly beneficial. If you look at that LHD, I bet overall utilization itself is probably 30%, if not lower.
Right.
And what are those big ends on either side? Something as simple as shift change. I bet it takes the guy 45 minutes to go from the shaft to the change room to his workplace. But if you actually look in the data, in the human tracker thing, and the time with which that LHD starts up, you probably have 2.5 hours on either end. Simply, what we're not doing yet, and this is what I've been talking about, as you know, for a long time, gamifying data to change behavior. We have all these phones getting us super addicted. It's not sexy, it's not as cool as like automating something, but gamifying data in a way that motivates employees, and I think our employee has completely changed now. They go home and play Xbox, so they're familiar with that type of feedback. I said there's a whole bunch of data in there that we can use now. Machine health data too. I bet you have probably 15, 20, 30% idle rate, where you have this massive truck that's essentially extremely expensive air conditioning. We have that too in Florida, or everywhere you have massive amounts of idling time. That data is being logged by the telemetry. Do we provide some sort of feedback to the frontline supervisor to go and have a coaching session with that operator or something? No. So there's a whole bunch of data available right now that we're just not following through. Maybe because of culture, maybe because we have to interface with the worker and the frontline supervisor, and that's perhaps, as innovators, we're not as comfortable with. But I'm telling you, there's new concepts about using data that are from the video game industry or from making people more addicted to social media apps and stuff like that, that we can leverage for safer and more.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's two really good points in there. One requires us, I think, getting communication to the face, Wi-Fi to the face. If you have not got good comms to your face, then you're not even in the race, in my view. Because then you can give people exactly what you've got in your hand. You don't have to have anything fancy or new. You can do good gamified apps that not only get the data that we want, but also encourage people to use that information in the decision making that they're doing. And I think that's absolutely really important. And then the other thing that I think is sort of raised in part of this conversation is, I know on one model of truck there is 476 data points or sensors which you can get data. I think, Cal, you mentioned you're using 120.
420.
Or you're using 420, so it's slightly less. I'm still not sure you're actually using 420.
No, we're not using. No, we're collecting 400.
And so part of the problem I think we're creating, in my view, is not only petabytes of bloody data that we're never going to use. If we really thought about it, we weren't lazy and thought, well, what is it we actually want? Plus, we're creating a maintenance nightmare, because you imagine you're the maintainer that's trying to maintain the 420, sensors, or the 476, whichever one it is. I think as again, we need to think about what is the data that is needed by whom in the organisation. Let's collect that. Let's minimise the number of sensors we put on these things to do whatever it is we want it to do. So I'm not saying strip them all off. What I'm saying is put the minimum number required so that then you can keep them maintained. Because I certainly don't know about you guys, but I've gone and looked at some sensors that have given me pH records of like 18 and have for 2 years. And you sit there going, well, either we're on Mars and physics doesn't apply here, or there's something wrong with that sensor and we haven't picked it up for a couple of years. So, and I just think that's just wasteful. So let's think about what we want to do, why we want to do it, and absolutely then let's gamify it. Let's give people an incentive to use this stuff, because I can guarantee you all those people that we want to input data, use data in decision making, etc., will be on their mobile phones if we gave them to them, up on surface, chatting to their mates, chatting to even their peers on, underground, etc., on those social media platforms, more than they were hitting the button that we want them to hit to do a load.
So I've got two questions down the back. So sorry, Mike, cut you off. Yep, go ahead.
It's a bit of a tie-in with what Doug presented. A bit of a tie-in with what Doug presented, which is looking at these demand curves. So there we go. Application of technology. Isn't it wonderful?
Pass.
So I'm looking at these things. So I spent a lot of time in permitting and regulatory affairs and stuff. So I'm looking at these timelines as well. And it's more of a comment to think about and respond to. But first of all, the holistic approach, I firmly believe in. We got to look at it front end to back, all the way from exploration phase to closure phase. Absolutely. My concern is really looking at these demand curves and the pressures we're under. I think it's actually going to get more intense. I think that the rate at which we're moving is really going to exacerbate all aspects of mining, and it's a bit of a concern for me. I've worked in different jurisdictions, different places around the world, and I think there's going to be some interesting factors arising which we probably did not anticipate. So I think these pressures are just going to expand, and maybe just some comments on that aspect of it, how we're going to meet these challenges.
Yeah, I'll make a couple of comments. So one of the things that we're doing, and it ties nicely into Doug's graph. So we're doing two things at Oz. One is I've got a ConOps team that their whole role is to have a look at how they can piece together different technologies to radically look at ore bodies or assets, projects differently, so that some of those currently uneconomic assets we can bring forward, we can make them economic. And so that's their whole role. Their whole role is to sort of work out systemically, how do we piece different technologies together and fundamentally change the dial for this asset. The second piece that we're working on is radically reducing the time from discovery to first ore. And I think Doug mentioned 15, 20 years. I think I was betting on about 10, but you know, it's a shit ton of time. However, sorry, maybe I'm not. Am I not meant to swear in this twilight company? Sorry.
There's enough Aussies
you can
in here.
see,
We'll let you off.
sorry, you can see I'm both Australian and a miner, so apologies. But you know, so we're trying to reduce that time radically, you know, down to something like 5-ish years, let's say. And so we're looking at, well, what are all the delays in that process? Now, and you brought it up, one of the big delays is permitting. And one of the really interesting things when you dig into permitting is how often the permitting documents, because we still all produce documents, like it's about the only waste of paper that we seem to have in our industry now, because we even sign contracts electronically and stuff since COVID.
Still got a fax them in.
Have you got yes. I forgot that bit. But you know, it's the loss of those documents that often takes at least a year into the permitting cycle. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we digitise those documents from the get-go? And in fact, all of our design, our project documents, etc., are digital from the beginning. In fact, we're not creating a non-digital version, because the benefit that creates is not only can we communicate with governments and others faster, we can co-design, because that's the other thing that takes a lot of time sometimes is this design process. So we can co-design with EPCMs, with suppliers, etc., much more seamlessly. And then the other piece of the puzzle is, for us, is creating a digital twin where we can create a movie, and I think, Carl, you mentioned it before, where we actually create a bit of a movie of what is it that we want to create. You know, here's the processing plan, and this is what it looks like if you walk through it. Here's what the mine is going to look like over time, and you can sort of play it for people. Here's what the ore body looks like, etc. Because one of the things we found is it's so hard to communicate to communities, what are you really building? What is it really going to mean for them? Because, you know, like often it is an avatar situation. Like even my mum, and I've been in mining for 30 years. You talk to my mum, she would not know what it was like to live next to a mine, to be part of a mine. Even my son, who's about to do geology, yes. And I had nothing to do with the mind washing of him, by the way. He actually chose it for himself. But, you know, he doesn't know what a mine looks like. So, you know, if we can create these movies so that people can see and interact with what we're planning on building, I think that communication, that part of the process, you know, whether it's with environmental people, whether it's with communities, etc., shrinks. So it's all about shrinking that time frame.
So I'm mindful of time, and we've pretty much run over, so I'm just going to quickly throw back. No, that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the panel again. I'm just going to ask one final question. This is going to be the therapy question. So I want each of you to put out there, what's the one thing that you wish you had a solution for, or the big challenge you see in front of you that you're looking for the most help? Carl, you're going first. I've given you the hard ones twice.
Thank you. I really do believe that because we are compressed in time, as Doug said, in terms of solving some of these issues on GHGs, the one thing that I really do wish is that there is an understanding of what that curve looks like on achieving those goals. And that curve is not going to be straight line, and it's certainly not going to be parabolic in the negative direction. In other words, we're not going to achieve a lot in the beginning. And I think that that's perhaps a point of debate, because it'll take a long time to actually develop the technologies required to get there. And it is a bit like a Manhattan Project without having a Manhattan Project in this industry. And I think that that's one of the things that if you asked me what I wished for was a Manhattan Project by all of the major miners to actually solve some of the energy problems, energy sourcing problems, permitting problems with government. I mean, those are all very big pieces. Because if we take 8 to 10 years for permitting, you're already down that curve. You've got 5 years left to solve the problem. And you've put a solution in place already that won't solve the problem.
It's only 8 years to 2030, right?
Yeah.
Nancy?
For me, it's what I really want to solve is health and safety. It's a priority number one. We have more difficult deposit. Grades are lower, mines are deeper. Yeah. How can we remove everybody from underground and just operate from surface? We need to find a way to do that ASAP. For me, it's a priority. Seismicity, we have so much thin ventilation that we need to reduce. That's an important one. The other big challenge that needs to solve, I can't wait to start a new project, John. We need to start a new project so we can start from scratch with all this new technology, this data and all that stuff. But our existing mine, there's so many different equipment, so many different installations. The development is so big, it's so large. How can we connect all of that? How can we improve health and safety and bring technology with all those different things? That's something we have to work.
It's an easy one.
No. No.
Michelle?
So I guess mine is a little bit similar to Cal's, but mostly building on what Nancy's saying as well, because I mean there are certainly key problems I think we need to solve within our industry, and certainly you know, having no people underground, no people on surface even, but people in safe environments is obviously key. You know, ore body knowledge, which we've spoken about, you know, if we could understand exactly where our ore body was to the last gram, last metre, imagine how smooth everything would run from there on. You know, like a lot of the chaos we create or is created is because we don't know our ore bodies well enough. So I think there's some really meaty problems that we need to solve. And if we're going to solve them fast, I think we need to do them together. So I'm looking for, you know, more partnerships, more collaborations where we can really focus on solving some of those meaty problems together and doing it quickly. Because I'm not a patient woman and I'm getting older. So, you know, I haven't got 50 years to solve these problems. I want to do it in, you know, 2 or 5.
So all body knowledge, and the final comment goes to Mike from Balongi. How does that work for a TO?
Yeah.
Final comment.
Yeah, I mean, like the forefront of my mind is copper. I think about, you know, EVs, et cetera, and people talk about batteries and electric vehicles. Well, what about the grid? The grid's going to be a far bigger problem. So, and you know, with our Geological Data Services division, that's at the core of our focus is to build automated calibration processes to give real-time information on copper specifically, right? We're targeting copper on purpose for a moral reason tied to GHG. and I think, you know, beyond that, that's the role we play, but it's the integration and collaboration from permitting through, and governments through innovators and data and mining companies. That's the only way to address this issue and why we're all sitting in this room. So yeah, that's definitely at the forefront.
And as Oz Minerals is a copper player, we're very happy that you're focusing in on copper.
All right, if I can ask everyone to thank our 4 panellists. So tonight, thank you very much. You get off the uncomfortable chairs now, and I believe we've got and Jackie. And I think I'm now handing over to Jackie, who's going to be presenting to us on behalf of Amira Global. But I'm going to cheat and let Jackie do her own introduction.
Sure. I'm just going to, can I?
Tie it up.
There's movement on the right. I feel like, well, what is the man from Snowy River?
The word is passed around. I'll just give everyone a minute.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump right in. What a fantastic panel. I think it's absolutely amazing that we heard from 4 diverse groups. And I offer you the Manhattan Project. Where are you, Carl? Carl. I offer you the Manhattan Project. Amira's purpose for 60 years has been to bring collaboration across the mining industry to provide a platform to answer exactly those questions about how do we accelerate knowledge, technology, and deliver to the industry. And what MICA has been doing over the last 2 years is having those conversations with our member companies, with researchers, and identifying some of the issues. Now, I've got a presentation, but really after that panel, I'd like to share with you our opening the conversation and the 4 elements that we've been building at MICA to help the community actually deliver to those challenges. One of the critical elements is there is so much stranded research and development. There is so much knowledge out there that we are not accessing. At MICA, there's 60 years of an archive of 60 years of knowledge and technology and reports alone. And as I've delved into it like Alice in Wonderland, one of the examples I'd like to share with you is the P902 project. And the P902 project in the mid-2000s looked at aggregating all of the knowledge, all of the sensor technology, all of the research, all of the legislation around dry processing. The study looked at the glass industry, it looked at the food industry to understand what was being done. What was the latest tech, who owned the knowledge, where did the IP reside, and what were the gaps that needed to be filled for us to accelerate technology in dry processing. The subsequent project, 902A, was to look at dry processing of copper in arid regions. A wonderful study that built on the knowledge that had been aggregated around the world. And the GFC hit, and the mining industry pulled out its support. And this is a continued pattern of now sitting here wanting solutions to problems, but not investing in the research pipeline that can actually deliver the future results and the future knowledge. So what we want to do, and we've got a few of these if you want to look at it, we have started some work with the International Copper Association, with CRC Ore, to develop a knowledge platform. And the model we are using for this knowledge platform is the Cochrane Institute. The Cochrane Institute came together, it's a group that came together in the 90s in the medical industry that says there's a lot of knowledge in the medical industry. How do we get that knowledge to the decision maker without them having to do their own research? So the Cochrane Institute has developed the Cochrane Knowledge Platform. It has a system and a process to aggregate the latest research in the medical industry and allows your doctor to quickly look up the latest technology research on a particular issue without having to go and do it themselves. We'd like to supply the same for the mining industry so that decision makers can access the latest data and technology. And that's that knowledge platform. So we invite all participants, all knowledge aggregators to be part of that, so that when that mining engineer is trying to decide between one piece of equipment or another, they've got the studies at their fingertips. The second piece we're doing is aligning partnerships, and today is a great example of that. It's lovely to work with CEMI. We've been working together for nearly 2 years, ever since the last PDAC. We've been working with MICA and with GMG and with others. And what we're hoping to do through this process is to link arms so that we can accelerate the knowledge from research, from development, and into implementation. So that's a piece that we're working on at MICA. Defragmenting research is another big piece. Over the last 10 years, the amount of money that the mining industry has invested in research and development in Australia has dropped to 20% of its levels in 2010. We are now 1/5 of the investment in research and development, and yet the problem is growing. If we step back 20 years, we're at 9% of the investment industry was making in 2000. How are you going to solve the problem if you're not investing in the solution? And all of you are aware of how departments Mining departments, mining research departments are closing. It's absolutely abhorrent that the Camborne School of Mines, which produces some of the finest mining engineers, has closed its program for 2 years. That is a sad indictment of what we're doing as an industry, and yet we're faced with these challenges. And if any of you have travelled to get to PDAC, you know what disruption is in terms of knowledge supply, because the travel industry is trying to relearn how to handle bags, let alone get us onto the plane, let alone, I understand in Toronto, get us off the plane. That is an acute example of what we do every bust cycle. Every bust cycle, we stop the process and then we try and rally and pick up the process again. So what we're doing at MICA is trying to pull those pieces together so that we're not in the situation, the post-COVID travel situation. How do we defragment? How do we bring things together? How do we accelerate knowledge? And then, of course, increasing the return on investment. If we're going to have these swarms of technology, if we're going to engage the quantum computing and we're going to solve the breadth of the problem, how do we take a more systematic systems of systems approach? And that's what we're doing at MICA. MICA is a not-for-profit, member-based global organisation that's a platform for collaboration. And we're inviting the entire mining industry ecosystem, as well as associated parties, to be part of that. So I thought I'd just perhaps tell you about the ACT, the MICA collaboration on tailings. So why have we focused on tailings? Well, because it's the black and white image of productivity. If you look at the tailings volumes over time, and I'm a statistician, so I play with data in my spare time. If you look at the patterns of tailings volumes over time and you look at the emissions, those patterns are in parallel. So if we solve the tailings, we move less waste, we identify the ore more radically and more quickly. If we break fewer rocks, we're effectively solving the decarbonisation issue. So for us, tailings is a beautiful way of bringing together safety, decarbonisation, water, and of course the waste and materials handling. And at the same time, improving the productivity from the resource we have. So the program itself, we're working with our members. We've spent the last, our team has been travelling around the world, meeting one-on-one with our members to really understand the R&D roadmaps, the opportunities for collaboration, because despite the words around collaboration, there's always some secret sauce that companies want to keep to themselves, and that's okay. There's enough space there for us to collaborate. What do we need to prioritise and collaborate on? So we've got several programs that are emerging. The first of these has to do with safety around tailings, clearly because of the disasters that we have faced as an industry. There's the monitoring, there's the novel techniques around safety. A second program on precision, and I mean precision broadly, because in order to solve the tailings problem, we need to start at how we understand, as Michelle said earlier, we need an idea of what the ore body looks like. I'm a geostatistician. She's talking about the volume variance effect there. If we want to be precise, we need to understand the volume variance. And unfortunately, the ore bodies don't come up in neat little shoe boxes. We need to understand a little better. What is the precision from geology? Understanding even drilling, all the way through to when we move that material and then process it. Our P9 project looks at combining data, improving decisions around that data, exactly what we were hearing here today. And then, of course, we've got repurposing. Repurposing is a critical area of a source of data, a source of knowledge, a source of materials. And around all of that, how do we get the research and development to happen quicker? We can't wait for 3, 4, 5-year PhDs. How do we integrate and allow those students of knowledge who provide their time and their brains, how do we give them the access and provide them opportunity to supply their solutions earlier? There's a wonderful project MICA has. I'm so proud of this piece, and I stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before me. It's the WAXI project, which is the West African Exploration Initiative. In a short time, it produced 100 PhDs and data sets across West Africa of lithology, of structure, of mineralogy, spanning several countries in both English and French language. But the most beautiful part of it is it produced 100 PhDs for $15 million, as well as that knowledge. Of those 100 PhDs, half of them are in country. That is a wonderful ESG legacy for any industry to have in terms of the areas in which it works. So coupled with the work that we're doing in terms of the knowledge platform, in terms of where are the prioritized areas, how can we de-risk technology in those areas, we're also looking at how do we work with governments. There was a comment earlier about regulation. I think it goes far quicker than permitting, far deeper than permitting. There are some standards around technology that's adopted that is restricted by policy. So how can we get governments to be a little more innovative in terms of technology adoption? And then sitting across all of that, how do we keep the knowledge? How do we grow the talent pipeline? So I invite you to have a conversation with us, inform, co-create. We have got a QR code in the bottom there if you'd like to find out a bit more. I'm delighted to be working with CEMI on that, because not only do we need the research and development, but how do we deploy it? We're doing a similar thing with METS Ignited, and we've got partners in Peru Mining Hub. Patricia Pastorelli is our head of Global Alliances, who's pulling this together. We've got Anil, who's quite passionate about our knowledge platform. We've got Tony here in terms of the mineral processing around the globe, bringing that capability. Brad is in America, and Angela is here traveling with me from Australia. So I don't know if there are any questions. I've changed what I was going to say and do, Doug. Thank you.
I know you have lots of questions for Jackie, and just as you have lots of questions for me, but we're going to do that after the coffee break, because you're going to fade away if you don't have a coffee soon. So we're going to have Heather Edney come up, give her presentation, and after the coffee break, and then we'll have Adrian to give his presentation. Once we've done those presentations, and you can have a coffee and think about the really pointed questions you want to ask us all as we sit on these apparently not so uncomfortable stools. But I thought they were. There we go. Heather? Heather's the CEO of the Global Mining Standards Group. Guidelines Group, sorry.
So it's this little guy? All right, so similar to, how do I get this going? So similar to what Jackie just said, I also have a change of heart of what I'm going to speak about today. Sorry, Doug. But we're sitting down, possibly because it was after a wonderful meal last night, but in talking about what would be really what the today's about, which is about the ingredients, the how do we build that mining future that we want to see. And speaking with a good friend of mine, we realized it's really about building that recipe and the instructions of how do we get to the mine we want to see in the future. So Gordon and I have put together a little bit of a recipe for you. And I'll just take a few minutes. And what it is really putting on the table how we can build or bake tomorrow's mining. So it starts with ingredients. And I think that's what today's about. There's so many different pieces that are needed in order to come together and collaborate and develop what we need to address the future. And no one organization can do that, right? We've heard from CEMI, we've heard from MICA, we'll hear from METS Ignited, and I've even talking in the hallway with many of you. There's so many different expertise, capabilities that are required. Some of those, the ones on the, I always forget. the right-hand side, is sort of the area where GMG focuses. We really focus on common languages, common processes. We're a collaborative organization to help bring together everybody across the industry to share and sort of document and make available the knowledge and expertise that we've been building. Best practices. If we don't share our practices, share our wins, and share our fails, how are we going to know how to really make the most out of the technology and new processes that are developing? So that's the sort of ingredients we take to get to the future. And then you have to think, so what does it take to work with all those pieces? So within GMG, the way we approach it, the first thing you need to do is build that global community. We were created because of the need for a multi-stakeholder global platform where everybody is welcome to come and sit, share, and really help envision where we want to go, align the intentions, and then build out those pathways. At our table, we welcome all stakeholders. It's an opportunity where it's a really big and broad community. We have currently 125 members, but over 500 companies that participate at the individual basis throughout our groups. And they come together. The retirees are just as important as the executive because of the knowledge and expertise that they've built and grown over the past. And working together, identifying where we need to focus, and then seeing how to move that forward. That's an example of other companies that are members. The next step you have to do is enabling the collaboration. So within GMG, we bring the companies together. Our members decide what are the critical challenges they want to focus on. What are the absolute necessary partners and other organizations we should involve in those challenges? And how do we come together and share our knowledge and build out helpful guidances or projects that'll help mines speed to value? So within that, we have a very large, integrated, and iterative process of collaboration that brings together all types of experts. We make sure we understand the layers of expertise, the layers of knowledge that need to be at the different stages along a process to build up a guideline or to support the development of standards. And then within that, we also have a huge layer of education, because if you want that change in the industry we're talking about today, we need everybody across our industry to understand the requirements, to understand the opportunities, and to understand how to put it all together. So that ties into the providing a gateway to knowledge. There are so many disparate pieces and opportunities and storages of expertise and value and history of what has happened. But as an individual within mining, how do you find it all? How do you know globally all the knowledge and opportunities that have built up? So within GMG, part of it is just how do we help bring that together? We don't develop that knowledge. We don't own it. We're a small little piece in the middle that just how do we help people find each other and find those resources. Within that as well, how do we document the discussions like we're having today? How do we make, and I don't have the answer, but a good question would be that panel we just heard, how do we get that out to the rest of the industry? You know, what an opportunity. We had, 80 of us got to benefit from it, but wouldn't it be great if the other, another 20,000 people could see it online? So it's looking for those opportunities because there's so much amazing knowledge and discussions that happen. How do we make it easier to get to? And then a big piece for GMG, and that's why I jokingly corrected you, Doug, with the standards versus guidelines, is from when we were created 10 years ago, there was a huge focus on do we want to create standards? We were formed as an opportunity to address the challenges that happen in a way that everybody can be at the table and have an equal voice. We decided we would not be a standards body. We're not a standards body because there's so many of them and they do an amazing job. And that's not something we want to get involved in. Instead, we do guidances. What GMG produces is industry-driven documents. We're the table and chairs that bring together people across the industry. My team are all project management, facilitation, communications, really that hub that brings people like yourselves together, and you're able to share your expertise, put your knowledge, put your experience on the table, and then luckily I got a really good team of technical editors who can take, say, over 100 authors or 100 participants' input and develop this beautiful document the rest of you can follow and understand how that can help in your minds. What we do with standards is we work with a lot of standards organizations. What they tell us and what we see is mining companies particularly, other stakeholders as well, but mining companies particularly kind of suck at participating in the development of the standards they then need to use. It's a timing thing, it's a resourcing thing, it's a probably not the most interesting day in your life to spend at the standards development table. But so within GMG, we work with ISO, OPC, Mimosa, IEEE, you name it, as a way to help bring that mining knowledge to the standards table. Our guidelines are used as seed documents by many of the standards organizations as a way to get that industry input and that kickstart to standards they want to develop. And then the reverse, a lot of our guidelines make standards available to mining, and they provide guidance to what standards exist in different areas, how they might be integrated together. So if you looked at, say, our battery electric vehicles and underground mining guideline, there's a lot of different standards that are referenced and how they can be applied in different areas. So that's an important piece, because as we want to embrace the new technology, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing, there's a real lack of standards in certain areas right now, and a bit of a scramble by standards organizations to see who can help develop those required documents. And we need to make sure what comes out is something that will be safe and will be useful and will be effective for our industry. And then finally, how do you pull it all together? And that kind of ties in with a day like today. It's about partnerships. So GMG is non-competitive. We will not compete with any other organization. So at the beginning of any of our projects or any of the topics our members want to look at, one of our first steps is what we call doing the landscape research, understanding what other organizations exist out there, and how do we either help pull that together, or how do we bow out and say, look, we're not going to get involved in this topic because these other groups are already covering it so wonderfully, and point our members there. With our friends here today from Amira, from METS, from CEMI and MICA, we're part of the conversation of how do we do this more into the future? And we're looking for your guidance. How do you see, I think Jackie worded it the best, the collaboration of the collaborators, right? How do we integrate all of our different groups more effectively? Because at the end of the day, you're the same companies supporting all of us. I think there's a lot of opportunities. I just spoke with Naturalia outside. You know, how do we take all these voices, all these communities, and make sure the touch points are known, and that we can speed our right road to value through working together. And then finally, in GMG, the final ingredient for the future is the guidelines and the white papers and the different documents we produce. The opportunity to look at how do you implement the technologies and processes and innovation our partner organizations are all driving the development of. So I just have some examples I won't go into, because I'm certainly not the person that should sit up here and explain a time usage model to you and its various applications. I can tell you, we've heard this is now pinned up at in the wall of dozens of mines, so that's a good thing to hear about. But within our guidelines, the way GMG works, our members agree on areas they want to collaborate. We form working groups, which are communities of interests, and then those working groups decide on guideline topics they want to focus on. And through that, they develop these guidances. They're openly available. They're for download on the website. Anyone can access them. We encourage people to use them, break them up, throw these in your PowerPoints. We see that all the time. But also provide the feedback. What needs to be done to further the area? What else could be would be a helpful assistive tool? And then finally, these are our working groups. So we do have 9 working groups. The conversation we heard today, really, as you can see, everything always fits within those sort of buckets. And within those, we just did, it's worth noting, a mining company roundtables this year. We had 38 mining companies participate in some 12 big meetings and discussions. There was 5 key themes that came out of that, and it didn't matter if you're talking mineral processing, underground mining, surface, asset management, whatever. Decarbonization is a priority from different lenses across the board. The data management conversation we just heard, That is the critical conversation. And what we heard from the people that participate in GMG, from the mining companies, they all feel like they're not doing well with their data. They all feel like some people at their companies do well with data, but as a rule, there is so much that could be done better, and it's needed if we want to embrace the technologies that are to come. Standardization of processes and being able to share each other's learning so you can advance faster, learn from each other's mistakes and positives. And then finally, the skills and workforce side. I mean, I think that's as critical as data right now. How are we going to man their minds? I can't even figure out how to man my communications team at the GMG. How are we going to man our minds? So I think this is a bit of a surprise. Oh, there, I was done. So Gordon and I just thought we'd share that little bit of ideas for you. Is there any questions about? Oh no, we're not doing questions now, right? On the panel, yes. It'd be nice if we actually had cake.
Yes. Get on to Gordon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Now, fortunately, because they changed the programme, shocker, Jackie and Heather have gotten us more or less back on track, so we're going to have the last of the presentations from Adrian. Hopefully he's not going to spoil the schedule. No. And then we can all have a coffee and you can get your interrogations prepared. So when we all come back on the hot seats. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so I realise I am standing between all of you and coffee, so I will try to keep it brief. I took notes from the early session because it made me easier to present. I'm going to explain what Mets Ignited is in a minute, but just a couple of observations from the panel and the various discussions. I noticed that the bigger the challenge, the higher the walls are in terms of collaboration. It just feels like when I asked the last question for the different mining companies, what are your biggest challenges, what are the things you're facing? Everything was, well, we're trying to work this out. They described what their problem was, but then they described that they were taking the responsibility to solve the problem. And then I was thinking about the data and the complexity of information. I used to run Mincom for a little while when it was first acquired by ABB. So someone just said they manage data really badly. Yes, correct. You all manage data really badly. There are a lot of very good technology companies who could help you manage data very easily, but it requires collaboration and it requires some investment because those companies make money out of selling the service of using information better. And if they don't make money, then they're not going to participate and they're not going to be interested. So one of the things I want to talk about today is a little bit around just productising technology and who you actually partner with and the valleys of death, right? We talked about the innovation valley of death. We talked about the research valley of death. That's me paraphrasing what Jackie said. But we've got 60 years of research in Amara, but it's just sitting there, not being capitalised, not being used. We also have inside all of our mining organisations decades, in some cases centuries, of investment in innovation and research to try and solve some of the most complex challenges you could ever imagine. And are we attracting the best and brightest from out there in the general market to come and solve some of the biggest, hairiest, ugliest challenges with great capital equipment, awesome technology, huge capability? No, we're not. We're losing that battle. And that's partly because we are not embracing the external environment in which we operate and we stay amongst ourselves. We try to solve things in our little silos. I think silos are really important. You don't want to break down the silos. I think then you just end up with a mess. You want domain expertise in every different silo, but you want to build communication channels between them and understand what the purpose of each silo is, what it's trying to achieve and how you help. And so a little bit just background of Mets Ignited. So it's a Australian federal government funded, it's equivalent of the MICA program, what Doug and Charles are just embarking on. We're about 6 years into the journey. We had Jackie as part of the team, we had Angela as part of the team. We've been across the network with lots of help in the room. And what we've achieved through this program is we actually did collaborative projects with industry. But when we said industry, we didn't talk about the mining companies as industries, they were the co-investors. We actually partnered with technology companies who are trying to solve the problems of mining industries, partnering with research organisations to bring research to market as products and services that they were selling in a profitable way, because you want sustainable innovation. You want to attract people to do more in the sector. And as a result, we did our first 30-odd projects. We did 15 million of investment. Industry put in about 35 million from different mining companies and partnerships, created 600 jobs. Those 20-odd new products in the market now generate about 700 million of recurring revenue, and that was over a 6-year period. And that just shows the power of making investment in technology and collaboration profitable and sustainable for the companies whose purpose it is to sell innovation to markets that need it. And so one of the things that we all need to do is do a better job of making our sector more attractive for the innovators that we need to solve the challenges that we're facing. So I'm going to try fly through. We all know the current, we don't need to talk about the challenges of the resources sector. If we don't know them, we're in the wrong place. The biggest challenges we see when we talk to mining companies is, this is going to be automated, let me just click them all through. The visibility of innovation in the ecosystem. It's really hard for a mining company to see what is out there. And that's partly because they get bombarded with a hail of silver bullets. Everyone's got a solution to the problem the mining company doesn't have. So we need to do a better job of communicating our value propositions in terms of innovation and technology to mining companies, and remembering that any form of communication is in the sort of the listener's perspective. So that also means listening to what the mining companies are truly trying to solve and how they measure what success looks like in their terms. So we need to do a better job of that. The capability. So everyone's got skills shortages, everyone's got challenges, there's changes in technologies. The biggest threat that we see to the adoption of innovation is the lack of resources to support it in any business. If you're a mining company and you've got production targets and you're going to adopt the new technology and you've got no skills in your workforce and that thing goes bang and your production goes down, you're not going to put that technology in. So capability is a huge challenge, and that also leads in a competency. So if we can help the challenges become more market available, commercially available, then companies, producers of technology, will invest in developing people and skills and make them available to the mining operators to capitalise on, to utilise. So there's got to be a virtuous cycle here. There's got to be something in it for everyone. And the final one is capital. So we, as an industry, are losing investment capital in innovation more than anyone else, because they see that our industry is not aligned with the social responsibility objectives of most investors, even though we're probably 20 years ahead of changing our sector to a future sustainable model. We just don't tell anyone. We only tell each other at PDAC and in rooms like this. And we, as we say, that where do they think their iPhone minerals come from? But we don't do a great job of showing them how, why, and what help we need. We've got to do a better job of that. I'm going to fly through because I'm mindful of coffee. I think I just said all that. But the other thing I'm going to touch a little bit on collaboration. I talked about it was interesting. I walked the floor of PDAC yesterday with one of my colleagues, Russell, who's here in the room somewhere hiding. There he is. And it's also amazing to see just how many vendors are out there really trying to help. Now, they might not know how to help, but you can help them do a better job of helping you by communicating with them on what you need in terms that they understand. We always talk about contextual communication in collaboration, so understanding the purpose of each participant in the conversation and what is in it for them. You will find mutual beneficial opportunities if you walk around the floor out there with a list of problems and explain how you measure what this as a problem is, what good looks like, what the KPI is that you're trying to achieve. If you go and have that conversation, it is a very different conversation with a vendor. I'll tell you a little backstory. At GE, when we first started to go into the mining business, I spent nearly 5 years at GE. I actually started in the energy business, and I was head of corporate accounts at BHP and Rio Tinto. So as a customer, the two mining organisations spent about $2 billion a year with us as a vendor. Directly and indirectly, we were the propulsion systems on the Komatsu haul trucks. They used our locomotives at Rio Tinto and the iron ore facilities. Cape Lambert, West Angeles had our gas turbines as a power station, a whole lot of water treatment, chemicals, everything. It was quite a large business at General Electric. One of the things, it was talking to John Kronicki, who was the CEO of GE Energy at the time, and we talked about what changes he needed to make to his business if he wanted to serve the mining industry. And his comment was, I do $55 billion a year selling my products and services to a whole range of different industry sectors. If I've got to carve out a group of my products and change them just to suit one sector, I'm not interested. I don't care. So I know that the mining industry has unique challenges, but the technology that is there to solve those unique challenges actually applies to multiple industry sectors. It might apply a little differently, but the underlying technology is still the same. So collaboration, not just amongst our peers within our industry, but across other sectors, is critically important. We're very proud as a sector for the amount of technology that comes out of our industry that's consumed by defence, by space, by energy, with transportation. We talk about it all the time, yet we don't look over the fence at what they've got that they could use to help us. So we need to start to break down some of those barriers and start to collaborate across other sectors. But just my point there is, as I talked about the collaboration paradox, and I should have clicked one more, we need to understand the silo that we sit in, we need to understand the silos that other people sit in, and then from that perspective understand where there is a contribution to share opportunities, to share innovation, to share skills, to de-risk decision-making around adopting innovation. And also, to be honest, if I took the panellists before, if I aggregated all of their problems and I asked their CFOs how much they were willing to contribute to solutions, I reckon I would aggregate a large enough market demand that a whole bunch of vendors would be lining up going, yep, there's a market I can serve, I'm interested. But today, our vendor communities are not serving the mining sector first. Our STEM students aren't coming to the mining sector first. We are not an attractive industry to serve because we don't do enough to be easy to do business with. And if we want to see innovation grow, we've got to make it a collaborative environment where we reward innovators so they generate profits and services, they get business from working together. So we're talking about the Global Mining Guidelines Group, and we're talking about the battery electric guidelines that have just been published. This is one collaborative group. It's really quite interesting group. It's a group of essentially mid-tier miners and some vendors and some researchers, all trying to work together to looking at solving electrification. And what made this group really tick is there was originally 8 or 9 mining companies that all put their total aggregated demand together, and they said, these are the problem we want to solve, this is how much it costs us today, this is what good looks like for us tomorrow, this is how much we're willing to pay for it, but if we're going to buy this type of technology, this is what we expect from the vendors, this is what we expect from the innovation, this is how the technology needs to work. And by aggregating demand, all of a sudden we got a whole bunch of vendors turning up, investing time and effort and resources. Remember, a technology company is as capital constrained as a mining operation. They have scarce resources with lots of customers, big margin targets that they never hit, huge sales targets that they never reach, trying to make a profitable business and train people to build new technologies to serve our sectors, so they're just as constrained as us. So when they look at this, they go, you know what? There's a market there. I'm going to put some resources in and I'm going to start focusing on industry challenges at the collective level. So aggregating the demand for innovation is a really important factor. So given that we've got coffee next, and I am going to wrap a little early, basically the main point of this conversation is to say, if we want these new innovations to achieve and overcome the challenges we're facing as a sector, we all need to understand that innovation is not a charity. And if we want the best innovators to participate in our sector, there has to be something in it for them. So we have to make a marketplace. Now, we need to hold them accountable as well. But it's interesting that we've got a lot of tolerance and patience for inefficiencies in our operations for 20 or 30 years, but we only give a vendor 6 months to prove themselves or we kick them off site. So we've got to think a little bit differently about how we engage with innovators, explain to them better what the expectations are from us as operators to them as suppliers of innovation, and understand the commercial terms and be patient. But of course, we don't want to bank our whole operation on a new innovation because that's pretty stupid too. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. That was the main point for my discussion. Collaboration is absolutely key. You've just heard from all the different stakeholder groups that got ingredients to this solution. There is a whole bunch of people really desperately trying to help. So every one of these groups, if you look at CEMI and MICA and the work they're doing, you look at what GMG is doing, you look at what Amara is doing, you look at what we're doing at Mets Ignited, we are actually all here desperately trying to help. So lean in, see how you can help. Go and have a look at the vendors across with a fresh set of eyes. Don't go over there saying, what have you got for me? Tell them what your problems are and ask them if they've got something that they can help you solve. Because if we start to reward innovation, we'll start to attract more people to our sector, we'll attract more investment to our sector, and we'll attract a lot more new technology to our operations. And you're going to grill me after the break, but we're going to throw to coffee. How's that, Doug? Keep us on time? All right. Thanks, everyone.
So that's it for now. Please go and have a cup of coffee. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. And we'll be back here at 11 o'clock sharp. Okay? Thanks.